In this video lesson, you will learn about the media concept and the relationship between reach and frequency. This is yet another measure when dealing with media planning, buying, and selling in general. After you finish this video lesson, you will be able to define reach and frequency and explain their importance, understand the media terminology associated with reach and frequency, understand the concept of audience duplication and unduplication, and understand how to calculate reach and frequency, and understand the uses and application of reach and frequency. Let's start with the basic terminology that you need in order to understand. Reach is the unduplicated percentage of a population exposed to one or more times to a message. Each person, by the way, is counted only one time. The reach of an individual program or vehicle is also called a rating. Frequency. The number of times each person from the audience is exposed to a message. Audience duplication. It is understood that an audience will be exposed to multiple times to a commercial message, especially if you're running a campaign or a schedule. As opposed to reach, where each person is only counted one time, duplication means that each person is counted for each and every time they are exposed to the ad or message. Effective reach. This calculates the percentage of reach which makes an impact over the viewer. In other words, while reach means the percentage of viewers or audiences exposed to the ad or commercial message counted at least one time, effective reach defines what percentage of reach will produce an impact or the desired result. Like effective reach, effective frequency is the desired level of multiple exposures that are deemed minimal for producing effective awareness levels or that will produce an impact with the desired result. Now, the general explanation to help you understand the concept and interrelationship of reach and frequency, let's understand that because all adults do not consume the same media or to the same extent. For example, some people watch television heavily, some moderate, some light, and some people not at all. That applies to all media to some extent, because you have to make a decision to turn on and turn off the TV set to watch, or you have to tune in to a TV station to listen. But let's say you may be driving and almost involuntarily be exposed to a billboard carrying a message. Thus, advertising campaigns or schedules will reach an amount of the target audience and perhaps multiple times. So, for example, if you live in the United States, think how many times you have seen the Geico insurance commercial. Or if you live outside the US, think of any advertising message that you have seen more or several times. This is called duplication. In advertising, we need to have a good idea of what percentage of the audience was reached without duplication, or you count them only one time. Further, we know that more than likely they saw the advertising message more than one time throughout the course of the campaign or the schedule. We need to average the level of exposure. So reach is the percentage of unduplicated exposure, and frequency accounts for the duplication by averaging the exposure. This is also important to understand because there is what is called advertising wear out, or the point where the commercial message loses its potency. It is the media professional's task to understand how much media weight is needed to produce the desired result and understand where is not being effective anymore. I also like to say that we are in the waste management industry, meaning that ineffective advertising budget placement is wasted. There are many factors that play into this concept, but keep this in focus as you learn about media in general. So let's talk about the typical application of reach and frequency, which are very important in media. So a media planner sets a schedule and effective reach and frequency goals as measures to make sure that the appropriate percentage of the target audience is reached a number of times. Remember that a consumer does not see the commercial, run to the store. It takes a certain amount of exposure or frequency before that commercial message, sinks in. It takes a desired level of multiple exposures deemed minimal for producing effective awareness levels, followed by trial of that product or service, and sometimes through multiple channels. Contrary to the classic purchase funnel model of attention, interest, desire, and action, advertising is not linear. After a schedule is laid out, reach and frequency are also used to evaluate if the media buy or media plan is on target. In other words, effective reach and frequency goals are set. The campaigns is placed through the designated media, and the results are monitored against the goals. This is true, by the way, for all KPIs or key performance indicators set for each campaign. Reach and frequency can be set as a goal. Reach and frequency results are used to monitor the effectiveness of the media vehicles or channels. The analysis can be done as follows. You can do it for one medium or several media vehicles, for example, to test the total television campaign as well as individual stations in order to compare exposure efficiencies for each vehicle against their competition. Reach and frequency can also be run for each media if several media are involved. For example, you can do a reach and frequency report for each medium if the campaign is running, for example, TV, television, radio, print, etc., to assess the efficiency of one versus the other, reaching the target audience an optimal number of times, and to assess if the reach and frequency goals are being met individually. Before we start with the formulas, you will find that some look suspiciously the same, some formulas. Calculating reach is the same way that we calculate a rating and the same way that we calculate coverage, which you will learn in another lesson. It depends in what context we are talking about, so don't get confused, okay? Let's start. Let's look at the numbers in this easy to understand example, right? So the stats are that the universe for this particular market, let me write it here. So you have a market of 10 people. So this becomes your universe. Remember that universe is also population and it's relative to the market that we're talking to. So the universe is a small market of 10 people. Remember that regardless of how many times each person saw the commercial message, they're only counted one for the purpose of reach. In this particular example, how many people saw? 8 people saw the commercial. Some people saw it more, some people saw it less, but counted only one time. 8 people, in this particular case, person 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, and 10 saw the commercial one time. And then the commercial message aired a total of, and let me put it here under frequency, but the total impressions or gross impressions here, how many times did the commercial air or impressions delivered on this campaign? If you count the eyes, person 1 saw it 1 time, person 2 3 times, person 3 1 time, person 4 1 time, person 5 1 time, person 6 2 times, person 8 2 times, person 10 1 time. So if you add all these impressions, you had 12 impressions. So let's start with the formula for reach. So for calculating reach, the formula is understanding the universe and the exposed target audience. So reach is calculating taking the number of people that saw the campaigns, counted one time, divided by the universe. In this case, 10 people is the universe. Remember, this is a very simple example, times 100. So out of the 10 people in the universe, 8 saw the commercial message at least one time. So calculating reach for this example is 8 people exposed divided by the universe, or 10 people times 100. So your reach here is 80%. 8 divided by 10 times 100. This is unduplicated reach for this market and this advertising campaign. Now let's take frequency. So calculating frequency, understanding the exposed target audience and the impressions or exposures. Frequency is calculated taking the total exposures or impressions of the commercial message in general, and you divide it by the number of people exposed. So here, we're taking 12 gross impressions, right? So again, if you're looking at the chart, just count the eyes. And I went through this already. So person 1 saw the commercial 1 time, person 2 3 times, person 3 1 time, person 4 1 time, person 5 1 time, person 6 2 times, person 8 2 times, and person 10 1 time. Person 7 and 9 do not count because they did not see the commercial message. So here you divide the 12 impressions by the 8 people that were exposed, and you get 1.5 average. So you take all these numbers, 3, 1, 2, you divide them by the number of people exposed, and you get the commercial was seen an average of 1.5 times. You see that taking all the different levels of individual exposure, and then you calculate an average, just to have a solid idea of how the campaign performed. Now, step 3, let's understand how do you calculate these results. So here, we're in this particular slide, we already went through this, is calculating reach. In slide number 2, you calculate frequency, and now calculating results. So here we see that the reach is 80% of the target audience saw the commercial message at least one time, and frequency means that the target audience saw the commercial message an average of 1.5 times. Now, we're basically, this was a very simple example, very easy to understand, so you can understand the concept. But now let's look at calculating reach and frequency, seeing like a number problem. So let me erase the board for a minute. So here we have, in this example, pull it up, okay. We have a universe of teens. Remember, we use the word universe, but it could be population, etc. But your universe of teens, 12 to 17 in this particular market, is 12,500. So this is how many teens, 12 to 17, you have in this market. The campaign delivered 13,000 gross impressions. And the unduplicated number of teens reach was 7,995. So what this means is that how many teens were exposed at least one time over the course of the campaign? 7,995. So now, step one. The question is, what is the reach and what is the frequency? So in this particular case, again, what is the reach? You take the number of teens exposed at least one time divided by the universe, which is 12,500 times 100. So your unduplicated reach, rounded up, is 64%. Now let's calculate frequency. Frequency, remember, let me use another color. To calculate frequency here, you have to calculate, let me put it here. Okay, let me do it here. So to calculate frequency, you take the number of impressions, right, which was 13,000, divided by the number of teens that were exposed at least one time, which was 7,995, and that gave you a 1.6 average frequency. Now let's go to step 3 and understand how do you report these results. So technically, 64% of all teens in this market were reached an average of 1.6 times. Let's take this lesson a little deeper, but nothing too complicated to understand. But that is the relationship between reach, frequency, and rating. So let me erase this really quick. Okay, so if you know reach and frequency numbers, you can calculate how many GRPs or TRPs it takes to reach those levels by multiplying reach times frequency equals GRPs if we're talking about homes, or TRPs if we're talking about demos. Okay? So basically, this is how many rating points to run to reach this level. So if you know 2 of those 3 numbers, you can calculate the others. Okay, so let's see. In the previous example, the number of teens, the reach for teens 12 to 17 was 64. And the frequency was 1.6. So 64 multiplied times 1.6 equals 102.4. Or these are your TRPs. Or again, it will take 102.4 rating points against teens 12 to 17 to reach 64% of them, an average of 1.6 times. The questions will always be, is that sufficient or effective? And that's always our dilemma, to avoid spending the right, or to actually spend the right amount of money with minimal to zero waste to produce the business objective for the client. So this struggle is always real. So let's pretend that for this example, you don't know what the reach was, but you know the frequency and you know the TRPs. So if you know the TRPs, which is 102.4, you divide that times the 1.6 average frequency in order to get the reach of 64. So if you know TRPs and you know the frequency, you can get the reach. See, it's not difficult. It's just understanding the numbers so that you can make sound decisions. So I encourage you to keep practicing, and I'll see you in the next video lesson.